The time has come, the walrus said, to talk of other things, like shoes and ships and sealing wax and cabbages and kings. If carbon-based wood and trees are burned, the carbon dioxide is used in photosynthesis to grow more. It's the circle of life. An equilibrium is reached. It helps, of course, if the energy from burning the trees is used, as opposed to swathes of forestry burning out of control. What's the problem? Although additional carbon dioxide in the atmosphere would help with additional plant growth, coupled with UV light through photosynthesis, as is done to grow greenhouse vegetables on an industrial scale with 1200 parts per million, as opposed to 400 parts per million. The increase in carbon dioxide percentage in the atmosphere is a measure of how much fossil fuel now and whale oil in the past has been burned, plus maybe removing nitrogen for fertilizer. A sustainable atmosphere can, I suppose, be gauged by monitoring the carbon dioxide content. But what is the point of scaremongering that the end is nigh, while the free fall of greed continues to determine the fate of the planet? What is, or is there, a collective goal for Earth? Where are the suggestions and solutions? Funding to be on the winning team? To fuel consumption while preaching doom and gloom achieves nothing more than a self-righteous right to say, "I told you so." It is reckoned that the mass of the moon has a gravitational pull on the waters of the earth. The moon circumvents the earth once every 27.322 days, but it does not revolve in an orbit round the center of the earth. The two masses are taken as one, and both are revolving around the combined center of gravity, or barycenter. If the two bodies were considered as a single spinning object, the point would be the centroid of it, thus producing a 27.322 day wobble and possibly centrifugal force acting on the ocean's water opposite to where the moon's position is. Thus, the watery component of this planet is bulging towards and away from the moon with an elliptical cross-section. In the middle of a large ocean, this bulge would be about 600 millimeters or 2 foot. The Earth is also independently spinning once every 23 hours, 56 minutes and a little under 4.1 seconds. As the Earth spins round, the wedge-shaped seabed of approaching or retracting land pushes up or drops the bulges in the sea, causing a larger tidal range in some geographic areas. On the coastal regions around this island, the range between high and low tides is approximately 3 meters. In other areas, less or greater, 5 meters or more. As the water level is bumped up and falls again, there is a tidal underflow as the mass of water changes height. Just over every 12.5 hours there is a high tide, with a low tide just over 6.25 hours in between. As the Earth spins round, the rising wedge of the seabed pushes the bulging sea upwards from the east and draws it back down from the west at circa 1500 kilometers per hour at the equator and circa 700 kilometers per hour here. East of here, there is a large landmass with no sea bulge, so a greater tidal range can be expected to the west of the Atlantic. Nevertheless, The range here is about 3 meters, with high tide at different times around the country. If there was a large ship, a cruise liner of say 45,000 tons, an aircraft carrier of 95,000 tons, or a supertanker of over 500,000 tons floating on the water, whether the tide be in or out, high or low, the distance from the watermark on the side of the ship to the plimsoll line will remain unchanged. If the ship was tethered and chained aloft at high tide with, say, a large crane, and the seas allowed to fall over the next 6¼ hours, the potential energy of the heavy ship can be turned into kinetic energy as it is lowered back to the new sea level. Energy could be extracted through mechanical sprocket, rack and pinion, hydraulics, gearing, etc., and converted to electricity. Likewise, a flotation device of the same volume without the weight would be capable of producing energy on the rising tide with upward force. This idea of utilizing tidal lift and fall differs from using tidal flow, which uses underwater propellers or turbines with silt, cavitation, and other complexities. Say we were to build a tank from recycled plastic or whatever, with an area of internal footprint of 1 meter by 1 meter. We build the tank with 2 chambers. The lower chamber is sealed with air at atmospheric pressure. Its height calculated to support the weight of the upper chamber, so it floats above the waterline. If this tank were now encapsulated between vertical pillars secured to the seabed, enabling it to rise and fall. For convenience of calculation, let's say it is 6 hours between high and low tide, and the range is 3 meters. From low tide, over the next 5 hours, the tank will be raised 2½ meters, with a force capable of lifting 500 kilos. This energy can be harnessed. Over the next hour, the tank is locked to the pillars. A valve is opened, allowing the rising sea to enter the upper chamber of the tank via a small vane turbine, extracting energy as half a cubic meter enters the chamber. The tide changes. Over the next hour, the sea level falls to the level of the bottom of the top chamber. No energy is extracted during this hour. As the sea level continues to drop over the next 5 hours, the tank with its 500 kilos of water can be lowered, extracting energy. Then, at low tide, the valve is opened again, releasing the water from the top chamber back to the sea, while capturing more energy through the small vane turbine. The cycle repeats ad infinitum. One tank of this size has a force of 0.5 ton exerted for 22 hours per day. With, say, 1 kilometre by 1 kilometre of tanks, that would be a force equivalent to 500,000 tons. Plus air vanes or solar panels could be mounted on top of the structure, providing further worth. Extracting energy from the unending rising and falling seas, thanks to the moon, could of course be simplified. Think of bell jars and hydraulics. This method is described here to logically explain its potential as a source from which energy can be extracted without burning stuff. It would be dependable and consistent. As high tide differs around the coast, dwell times can be catered for. Is this a lunatic idea? You decide.
Hello? Hi, this is a call from Amazon to inform you that your Amazon Prime account will be auto-renew for $39.99 from your bank account, so enjoy using Amazon Prime services, or if you want to discontinue or unsubscribe the services, then speak to an Amazon service manager by pressing
1. Hello?
Hi, you missed a call from your internet service provider. We have been trying to get in touch with you. However, we will be disconnecting your internet connection within 24 to 48 hours due to some illegal activity happening over your internet service. For further inquiry, please speak to our executive. Press 1 to get connected to our technical executive.
These are the type of calls nearly every Monday to Friday morning to the house phone. There is a caller ID number and no doubt someone in an office should you be confused or associate enough to press button 1. There seems to be a fine line between legitimate business and scamming. These businesses use various ID numbers. They are legitimized by the service provider in being able to use button 1. Business these days is less trade and more taking advantage of someone. Hyenas and parasites abound. All is fair in love and war. Closing the deal and screwing the other guy. The clincher right now. The line between right and wrong creeps in a moral fade. Do not press button 1. Just hang up the phone. I would like to think I have a sense of humour. The ability to be able to see the flip side of something. Wordplay. A lateral look at things. To see the funny side of something. I suppose a bit of imagination is required, and the ability to suspend belief and entertain the ridiculous. For instance, should someone say, "Oh Mary, you're looking gorgeous," although I would say nothing, I would conjure an image of this person presupposing themselves as some kind of pterodactyl who wishes to tear poor old Mary apart and devour her flesh. Or if someone said, "That cake was gorgeous," I would have expected them to have wolfed it down, snarling, and now have chocolate all over their face. You can imagine the imagery when government ministers or officials interviewed on the radio claim that they can assure the public that they will bend over backwards and leave no stone unturned to get to the bottom of the matter. In the last video, I tried to put a verse from Leonard Cohen's Passing Through from an old 8-track before YouTube's bot started messing with my head and I dubbed over it. The verse was about Roosevelt. At the time I was struck by another verse. I saw Adam leave the garden with an apple in his hand. I said, "Now you are out, what are you going to do? Plant some crops and pray for rain, maybe raise a little cane? I'm an orphan now, and I'm only passing through. So are you." I might say by way of jest, I suppose he failed at raising Cain as he wasn't able. A little light banter, not earth-shattering, maybe vaguely witty or jovial, a throwaway comment for what it's worth. What harm? All through my childhood, many, many, many times, you say something innocuous and vaguely funny, or insightful, or witty. One person laughs or smiles. Someone else, with a greater sense of self-importance, will say, "He made a joke? Do we have a funny man here?" Then the intimidating, angry stare. "It wasn't funny. In fact, it makes you sound like a bit of a clown. You are a clown." These individuals use the same learned words. They are dim-witted, but not dim enough to be in league with their own demons to protect their sense of self-importance. I have always had the urge to kick these guys in the ankles with the sharp end of my boot. but have so far managed to resist. Maybe it's time to tell a stock joke. I used to listen to the radio when I was at work. I don't anymore. Mainstream stations have been switched off for over 10 years. I took account of the number of ads threatening fines and imprisonment from state and semi-state bodies per day that I was exposed to. Over 30. The irony was, they would also advertise on occasion to take care of your mental health. So these stations, although informative and entertaining at times, had to go. Anyway, the stock joke. A man driving home from work in rush hour traffic, not today or yesterday, in fact about 30 years ago. He could hear and feel the flapping of his back tire. He had a puncture. He was lucky it was on the pavement side, with the heavy traffic and bicycles. He could pull in just ahead at the gates of the mental hospital. He got his tools out, took off the wheel cap, loosened the 4 wheel nuts a tad, then jacked up the car. He removed the nuts, throwing them into the wheel cap. He gets the spare from the bottom of the boot. He notices a man in a dressing gown and pyjamas and slippers looking out at him through the gate. Carrying the wheel, he accidentally kicks over the wheel cap and the 4 nuts end up down a drain. What the bloody hell? Could he open the drain with the tools he has? It was deep, with black liquid at the bottom. What was he to do now? Find a phone box? Who would he call? The man inside the gate, wearing the dressing gown, said, "Why don't you take 1 nut off each of the other 3 wheels? That should be good enough to get you home, and you can buy 4 nuts tomorrow." Our hero did this, while our friend in the dressing gown watched on. "How come you were in there, and you thought of that?" asks our hero. "I may be mad, but I'm not thick," comes the response. In the days I used to listen to the radio, you would have people being interviewed, talk radio, chats and insights. Prison warders, psychologists, cops, judges, psychiatrists, etc., all asked at various times if they had ever come across anyone who was truly evil and irredeemable, and what was it that made them so. All would say that they had a complete void of empathy. To be able or capable of identifying with the feelings or effects of their actions on another human being were beyond their comprehension. If we were to look at an institution, organization, state or department as a single entity, a life form made of its parts, each task is performed by a different part of the brain with total disregard to the need from time to time of human beings to deal with other human beings, rather than a large machine that employs people as components, an entity that manipulates and interferes with people's lives, where tasks are broken down to a level where empathy is diluted to vapor. This results in a life form that is powerful and devoid of empathy, a being that, were it a single person, could easily be classified and identified as pure evil. With its might and size, maybe it has become an abomination. I mentioned this concept to a civil servant at one time. His response was that that's what judges are for, to keep the balance straight. I don't know. With all these ads I was listening to, where the law and the threat of the law were being weaponized, maybe I'll just keep the radio off. Individuals can be placed within an organization. The bright and breezy need not ever know the ugly side of the business. The psychopath's lever on the organization's bars, unfettered. A few months ago, I watched a movie called Nuremberg on YouTube. There was an analyst in the movie interviewing the prisoners to try to figure out what mental culpability understanding right for wrong, or to what extent culture and company can blur and shift the line. The analyst was summing up his conclusions, and I turned on the mic. I'm not sure if what he says is historical fact or poetic license. Anyway, here he comes.
Dr. Spear, help me understand what I witnessed today in the dining room. Goering's ability to dominate and intimidate without possessing a real shred of power.
Yes.
Well, how do you explain that?
Habit. Instinct. Something in the German character that responds to authority. Real or imagined.
That's it? That's all it is?
Yeah.
What about the ideas he expressed? The words, the thoughts, they had no impact?
What ideas? What thoughts? They were only platitudes. Nazi Germany was built on empty platitudes.
A man like you were seduced by empty platitudes?
Of course. Because you can hear in them any meaning you want.
You said earlier you wanted to tell me something.
I've been trying to encourage some of the other defendants to join with me in accepting guilt and expressing remorse. I made progress with Frank, and I have had high hopes for Jan von Schirach. But Goering means to bully them into joining him, and I fear now he will succeed. Unless someone stops him.
I understand. I'm sorry?
Hitler ordered all of us to be shot. Hermann, myself, our precious child. That is why we surrendered to the Americans. Why else would we have done such a thing?
I went through my notes last night. I've spent all these months trying to find a way inside their minds, hoping to understand how those people could commit such atrocities against my people. I believe there are a couple of factors that explain a lot of it. First, Germany is a country where people do what they're told. You obey your parents, teachers, clergymen, superior officers. You're raised from childhood not to question authority. So when Hitler comes to power, he has an entire nation that believes it's perfectly natural to do whatever he says. Second, propaganda. For years, Germans have been bombarded with ideas like Jews are not real human beings, or they're a corruption of the race. So when the government says it's permissible to deny Jews their rights and then says it's imperative to kill these inferior people, they comply, even if they've been your friends or neighbors.
Anything else?
I told you once that I was searching for the nature of evil. I think I've come close to defining it. A lack of empathy. It's the one characteristic that connects all the defendants. A genuine incapacity to feel with their fellow man. Evil, I think, is the absence of empathy.
Well, that's that. The people of Germany were, judging by the movies and innovation, far more developed than this little backwater. Okay, we may have had De Valera and Schodener conversing over a fine dinner as to which of the two cats gets the congratulatory letter and which is dead. The ordinary people here were being told, this life is just a trial, a test, an opportunity to secure a good spot in the next life, which will last forever. Follow the rules, pay homage to the VIPs, suspend rationale, and truly believe in your heart. Remember, contrary thought is a sin. Will you risk being damned for all eternity? Don't you know real life begins after you are dead, you oxymoron? It's odd. From the days when I would listen to talk radio, listen probably isn't the right word. It was white noise that you would sometimes hear and sometimes be oblivious to. It's strange the bits that would linger in your memory, while other bits, maybe more interesting, are forgotten. Priests and brothers engaged in missionary work in schools abroad are allowed to return to Ireland every so many years for a long holiday. They get about a month for every year abroad. As part of their stay, it has been customary for some to be interviewed on a talk show about their life and the importance of the coins in the collection boxes. They may also get a bit of locum-type work with special collections, family marriages, baptisms and the like. Anyway, this old missionary priest was being interviewed. He was in his 80s and had come home. They talked about life and highlights there, about the changes he noticed here since his last visit. Then he was asked if he felt he had earned himself a place in heaven. Most assuredly. Then he was asked, did you know what heaven was like? Could he describe it? He admitted that he had no concept of what heaven was like, but had been given an analogy by an older priest describing heaven and hell, which he liked to use. Hell, he explained, is everyone at a great banquet. In front of them are tables with the most succulent foods, but their hands are bandaged up with 1 meter long yardsticks protruding from their arms, where their hands should be. With these sticks for hands, they couldn't pick up food and get it into their mouths, so they were starving and frustrated amidst the sight and smell of this glorious feast. This is hell. Then in heaven it is the same, the banquet of fantastic foods. They also have sticks lashed to their arms where their hands should be, but they use their stick hands like chopsticks and skewers to feed each other. A funny stroke, peculiar thought to retain. Maybe it contains something unresolved. Each mouthful exploding on your senses with the familiarity and consistency of your favorite brand, resulting in an overwhelming zen of comfort and security. And in heaven, no doubt, the PA has a soft voice and music. There is no queue for the latrines, and the toilets are presumably equipped with a power shower stroke dryer and a button on the door to allow for the stick thing. Or maybe the sticks magically appear when you enter the dining room. Maybe I'm getting a bit too far-fetched. Maybe I'm overthinking this. Did we, the world, learn anything from Nuremberg? Not to let the bullies run the playground? Obviously not. To play your role zealously in the control and corralling of your citizenry, ready to attack and demand an instant apology from anyone who hints at that period of history or insinuates that you are following orders. Of course, a punch card or computer system is needed to disconnect you from your actions. No matter how zealously or dispassionately you support your collective, people learn so fast to switch off their humanity, to speak in jargon, patriarchal and intimidatory discourse while answerable to a superior, more disconnected and demanding results. How quickly we must deal with the faceless. There is a saying over here, why should I do my own barking when I have a dog? There are many willing to be dogs in return for being permanent and pensionable. Enough, enough, enough. Well, that's it for this episode. Thanks for watching and subscribe if you want to. However, the next episode should put the project to bed. Look at wiring diagrams and parameters, more examples of the lathe in use. I should be able to wrap up. As to the future, there is no guarantee. Just because the past has had a future to date doesn't prove that now we'll have one. But with a little blind faith, we may get there. Take care. Ciao. One for the machinists. Man of Conflict, 1953, with Edward Arnold. It's a movie on YouTube. If you like machinery or petunias, you may like that movie.